Let's go back in time. I'm thinking back at a time years ago. My family and I were in the park, sitting on blankets, and listening to a concert. There were many people there. They were sitting on the grass. They were dancing, some of them, and some were walking around. Trees dotted the lawn, and a river lay just out of sight over a rise. Now, I had at this time, through the diligence of my meditation practice, become aware of subtle energy. That's chi or prana or life force. And this life force flows through and around and about all creation. So a vision opened up to me, and I looked out and I could see the energy of the earth flowing over the earth like the surface of an inland sea. Very interesting to look upon. So, for instance, where a person stood or sat, the energy would simply rise above them, cover them, include them. The same as the trees and the shrubbery, everything was included in this energy field. I was engulfed by it, as if I was not. As if we were all pieces of fruit hanging on the tree of life, ripening. But to what end? There was another tree present, the tree of knowledge. We also are the tree of that fruit, that tree, the fruit of that tree. Like the parable which Jesus taught about the wheat and the tares, I'll relate that to you. You can see how it fits. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while they slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. When the servants discovered what had happened, they went to the master and they asked what he wished them to do. And he replied, "Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of harvest I will say to the reapers, first gather the tares and bind them in bundles to be burnt, but gather the wheat into my barn." And so we wait for the harvest. Then we may uproot the tree of knowledge and cast it into the fire. But how will we know which tree is which? By their fruits ye shall know them, said Jesus. This fruit of the tree of knowledge, it has many names. I shall name this fruit fear. It is the fear of man, man's knowledge, man's pride. And the tree of life is love, God's love. Who are we, man or God? Both. We have both the tree of life and the tree of knowledge growing inside us. One is to protect us and the other to undo us, unlink us, tear us down, tear down the protection which God has given us, which is love. That evening in the park, I saw God's love flowing as a sea of life force over the surface of the earth. The Chinese have what they teach about a protective energy. They call it Wei Qi. It hovers just above the skin. It protects us. It protects us by helping us stay warm. It keeps the sun from burning our skin. It protects us from negative emotions of those around us. Protection, Wei Qi. I will tell you what I discovered that evening in the park. The earth also has Wei Qi. It is the sea of life force which I saw flowing over the surface of that park, engulfing the trees, the river, the people. Our personal Wei Qi and the earth's Wei Qi are one and the same. But our portion of this protection has been greatly reduced, but nothing more or less than the human mind. We are children of the earth, pure and simple. For what is of the earth is of God. It is our heritage, but we can fight against our heritage. We can and we have allowed, with our human mind, the fruit of fear to grow alongside the fruit of love. A little girl was mesmerized by the doll she held in her hands. She stood in the aisle of a very large toy store, with her mother by her side. The store was like a whole world to her, a place to explore, a place of wonder. The mother's phone rang, and the little girl didn't notice as her mother stepped away. Now the mother was out of sight around a corner, and the child still didn't notice. 30 seconds passed before she looked up. Her chin began to quiver. Not seeing her mother, the little girl looked around for a moment and began to cry. The doll was forgotten. She started to run, unfortunately, in the wrong direction. There was no mistaking the child's distress. Just then, the mother reappeared from around the corner. "It's okay. Mommy's back." She picked her little girl up and rocked her in her arms. "I didn't go away." "Silly. You don't need to be scared." But anyone could see that the little girl was still paralyzed with fear. She didn't let up, screaming and sobbing. Went on and on. The mother looked embarrassed and quickly walked away. But the little girl, she is never going to forget this. Fear is one of the strongest layers of illusion we have. It's like a fog bank inside each person. But if you can pierce the fog, you'd see that something incredible lies on the other side, something you can't even imagine. What is that? The fact that we are not alone. No one is alone, because everyone is God, and He cannot be alone. Don't let fear be your guide. Let go and let God. Oh, you will all relate to this. People are afraid to go to the dentist because it will hurt. That's an assumption. Fear is teaching them. If everybody is afraid in the waiting room, but only 5% wind up feeling pain in the chair, then fear is pointless. 95% of the time. Fear is a terrible predictor of the future. In fact, nothing is as unreliable as fear, and yet people rely on it over and over again. Well, if the local weatherman was right only 5% of the time, he'd get fired tomorrow. It's time to fire your fear. This is how fear works. Fear works. Anytime one of your fears comes true, you give fear the credit for having protected you. That's making an assumption. A young woman goes to the doctor to get a checkup. "I'm deathly afraid of cancer," she says. "Are you sure I'm okay?" The doctor says, "Absolutely, your tests are clean. You don't have cancer." But she still thinks she might have cancer. So a few weeks later she goes back and the doctor examines her again and again. He says that nothing is wrong about her. No cancer. You've got a clean bill of health. This goes on for years. Finally, she's 80, and when she goes for her next checkup, the doctor says, "I am terribly sorry. I have bad news. You have cancer." The woman throws up her hands and says, "I told you so." Just because something bad happens doesn't prove that your fear was right. Fear will never stop trying to convince you. But when you choose to stop being convinced, you'll be fearless. Now, choose is not quite the right word to use. It isn't something you do or choose. It's something you become. You become fearless. When you hear the sound of God laughing, you become fearless. Then suddenly you realize that it wasn't God at all that was laughing, it was you. Who are you, really? You are God, and you are fearless. The fear you are feeling here in mortality is only an illusion. This doesn't mean you're not feeling it, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about how to break free from the illusion. I looked up fear on the internet last week, and believe it or not, one website listed 530 phobias. There may be a phobia for everything, and if you have one, and it's not on the list, you can call it in and they will add it to their list. What is it that you fear? What is your fear this morning? Unless you have awakened the dream, awakened from the dream, you have fears. So right here, right now, name your fear. Pick one and name it. Did you know that naming a thing gives you power over it? There are many ways of releasing your fears. One of the most powerful is simply to acknowledge that it is there. Often, this moment of self-awareness is enough. Why would that be? Acceptance of something places you in control of it. And that which you deny, you cannot control, for you have said it is not there. Therefore, what you deny controls you. You don't have to say it's okay to feel shame and blame, because in fact these are energies you want to let go of, not perpetuate. But it certainly is okay to say, I have these feelings. They are real. So right here, right now, name your fear. Pick one and name it. And in so doing, know that you have begun your journey to gain mastery over it. Last summer, I quoted Scott Peck. He said, life is difficult. This is a great truth, one of the greatest truths. It is a great truth because once we truly see this truth, we transcend it. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and accept it, then life is no longer difficult. Why is that? Have the difficulties suddenly disappeared? No. You have simply stopped fearing them. Imagine that your worst enemy comes over to your house. He sits down in the living room, and no matter what you do, he won't go away. Day after day, he refuses to leave. What do? You begin to ignore him. You pretend he's not there. Your home isn't your home if there's an enemy living there, though, right? So, it doesn't matter if you toss a drop cloth over him or you decide to completely redecorate the place. Until you figure out how to get your enemy to leave, you'll never feel safe. The world is your home, and it is safe. God created it that way. But as long as you live in fear, the world is a threat. If that doesn't matter to you, okay, fine. But by living that way, you'll never be free. The cure? Invite God into your house. Then fear will have to leave. Divine mind created divine ideas, taught Charles Fillmore, and then left it up to us to express these ideas as we see fit, as a human consciousness. The result is what we see around us. There is a part missing. Our expressions are incomplete. We, as a human consciousness, need to become aware of divine mind and allow this contact to influence our expression of the divine ideas. This is called awakening of the Christ, or union with God. If you invite God into your house as a loving guest, honored and praised, over time your house will become the house of God, and you will dwell in the house of God forever. The nourishment, instead of coming from your own mind, so to speak, comes from God. The thought comes from God. You're maintained by the thought of God, the love of God. How do you invite God into your house? Prayer. Prayer is the grandest of all mystical experiences. Fear has no chance in its presence. You cannot have God living in your house and not become as He is. God is fearless, and so will you be. In prayer, I open up to my inner life. I let it thrive, like when a person sits by a brook in nature. They can hear the birds, a bubbling brook, the wind playing with the trees. This is prayer. And they walk away from this prayer renewed. We can also say that prayer is body and breath awareness. Every other prayer experience will flow from that centering. Here's another path. Repeating a poem is all that is needed for this one. You become the poem. If God is in the poem, then you become God. That is what I meant when I said to invite God into your house. He is standing at the door. He is the door. Fear has not the power to stand in the way like smoke on the wind. It is no more. God is the wind. You are the wind. There is a oneness of all things which you will encounter over and over until it sticks, and that is who you are. And what is that? Fearless. Am I making myself clear? Remove the obstacles which are holding your fear in place. By surrendering to the love which is all around us, touch God, and this link will take away your fear. This link is called union with God. Union. It will uproot the tree of knowledge, leaving only the pure fruit of the tree of life hanging there, ripe and ready to pick.